Let's see. Okay, number 28. Were there any Hutu extremists or interahamwe that you formed favorable opinions of? I mean, there's people who did make some good choices that also made some horrible, horrible choices. Killers who made some good choices. But that's not gonna give me a favorable opinion. Trying to be true to your question. You know, I appreciated some of the positive things that some of the horrible people did, but a favorable opinion, nah. Number 29. How did you choose who to help? Could you help everyone you wanted to help? Good question. No, couldn't help everybody you wanted to. Basically, working with the colonel in charge of the city, he directed me to these orphanages, and they seemed to be an obvious need. Kids were dying. There's little graves in the parking lot of the biggest orphanage just because they didn't have water. And so, yeah, I think who I chose was largely influenced by the colonel who was in charge of the city. I was working pretty much under his permission, so to speak. Not that he was my boss, but his permission. And then as things presented, there was themselves needs. Our neighborhood, we organized some volunteers in our neighborhood to distribute biscuits in our neighborhood. So basically, the question often is, people talk about, you know, whose responsibility are these kids at the orphanage, or whose responsibility? I often like to cut the word in half and switch it around, the ability to respond. And the question is, what's our ability to respond? As you see a problem right there in front of you, what's right here, and then what's your ability to respond? And those often would be two key questions in deciding who you're going to help and how you're going to help. Other than the orphanage situation, how many and what kind of close calls did you face? And they shot the back window out of my car. Mortars landed in our neighborhood. They were unexploded mortars in the street that you would drive around. It was hairy. It was horrible. Yeah, I don't know. You don't know how many. I mean, half a dozen, when I think back over it. And then there's all the ones you don't know anything about. Yeah. And let's try to do one more here. Do you feel haunted by the things you have seen? In some ways, like I mentioned earlier about, you know, walking past the orphanage and getting this sick feeling in your stomach, and when I think about Rwanda, yeah, you know, haunted, I guess, would be defined as, you know, bad feelings. I don't have nightmares anymore. I think it's probably definitely more than a year, yeah, more or less, maybe once a year. Don't have nightmares that much, or hardly at all. And I definitely do try to look for the good to counter that haunting, because the good is there, especially in Rwanda and its recovery. I hope you got some questions farther down the line about Rwanda's recovery. And we'll stop it there.